He was just a kid when they sent him away, a boy who made a single catastrophic mistake. Now, 2 years later, a man walks out of the same gates, but what he's about to discover in a forgotten, rusted mailbox will change not just his future, but the entire story of his past. If you've ever felt lost, like the world has already written you off, then stick around. This story is for you. And if it hits home, maybe consider subscribing, because we're building a community here for people who know what a real second chance feels like. The air on the outside tasted different. Not better, just different. For 2 years, my world had been filtered through steel mesh and institutional dust, the air tasting of disinfectant, sweat, and a low, humming despair. Now, standing outside the gates of the Northwood Juvenile Correctional Facility, the air was just air, cold, damp, and overwhelmingly empty. It carried the scent of wet asphalt and pine needles from the grim, silent trees that lined the long driveway. I was 18 years old, officially an adult, and officially homeless. My worldly possessions fit into a single, state-issued cardboard box. 2 changes of clothes that were already too small, a worn-out paperback, and a sealed manila envelope. Inside the envelope was $75 in cash, a one-way bus ticket to a town I'd never heard of called Havenwood, and a thin sheet of paper with a typed address. At the bottom, a handwritten note from my last caseworker, a woman whose face I could barely recall. "Leo, this is all your grandmother arranged. Good luck." Grandma. The name was a dull ache in my chest, a memory I had learned to pack away in a place so deep it couldn't be touched. She had died a little over a year ago while I was inside. They told me during a mandatory counseling session, a sterile notification delivered with practiced sympathy. I hadn't cried. I couldn't. Crying in a place like Northwood was a currency, and I was broke. Now, the thought of her, of the arrangements she'd made, felt like a ghost's hand on my shoulder, gentle and terrifying all at once. I clutched the strap of my box and started walking toward the distant highway, my worn-out boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The gray sky pressed down, a perfect match for the gray walls I had just left behind. Freedom didn't feel like a release. It felt like being pushed out of an airlock into the void. At Northwood, I had a cot, 3 meals, a routine. I knew who I was. Inmate 734. Out here, under the vast indifferent sky, I was nobody, heading nowhere I'd ever known. The bus ticket was for a place 300 miles away, a dot on a map in the state's forgotten corner. Why there? What could she possibly have arranged? My grandmother had lived in a tiny, rented apartment in the city, a place filled with the smell of chamomile tea and old books. She had nothing. No savings, no property. Just a fierce, stubborn love for a grandson who had failed her. The $75 felt like a fortune and an insult at the same time. Enough to eat for a few days, not enough to build a life. It was a goodbye gift, a final, futile gesture. I reached the highway, a lonely strip of blacktop cutting through the endless forest. The bus wasn't due for another hour. I sat on my box, the cardboard groaning under my weight, and watched the occasional car speed past, each one a self-contained world I no longer belonged to. The wind picked up, rattling the pine branches. It sounded like a whisper, a secret I couldn't quite hear. A single, cold drop of rain hit my cheek, then another. I didn't bother to seek shelter. I just sat there, letting the rain fall, wondering if it was possible to be so empty and still feel so heavy. The weight wasn't in the box I carried. It was in the 2 years I'd lost, and the terrifying blank pages of the life ahead of me. The bus smelled of stale cigarette smoke and damp wool. I took a seat by a window smeared with grime, pressing my forehead against the cool glass as the engine rumbled to life. The landscape that slid by was a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Smudged greens and browns, skeletal trees clawing at the low, gray clouds. For hours, I didn't move, just watched the world blur past. Each mile put more distance between me and Northwood, but the place was branded on my mind. I could still hear the echoing clang of cell doors, the murmur of the common room, the hollow sound of my own footsteps in the long, empty corridors. I closed my eyes, but the images were burned onto the inside of my eyelids. The fight. It had been so stupid, so pointless. A shove in a school hallway over nothing. A girl, a look, a word. But I was on probation, my last warning already spent. The other kid's father was a lawyer. Mine was a ghost I'd never met. My mother was, well, she was a story for another time. The only person in my corner had been my grandmother. She sat through every hearing, her hands clenched in her lap, her face a mask of desperate hope. The last time I saw her was through the reinforced glass of a visitor's room. She looked smaller, frailer, the light in her eyes dimmed. "You be strong, Leo," she'd whispered into the crackling phone receiver. "You're more than this moment. Remember that." I hadn't been strong. I had shut down, built a wall around myself so thick that nothing could get in. Not the guards' taunts, not the other inmates' threats, and not even the news of her death. It was the only way to survive. Now, her last words echoed in the humming of the bus tires. "You're more than this moment." Was I? I pulled the envelope from my pocket. The address was written in a clean, sharp font. 147 Crow Ridge Road, Havenwood. Beneath it, taped to the paper, was a single, old-fashioned brass key. It was heavy in my palm, its edges worn smooth with time. It didn't look like a key to an apartment. It was too big, too solid. It looked like a key to a secret. I turned it over and over, the cold metal a strange comfort. This key, this address, this was the last piece of her, the last thing she ever did for me. The thought was a splinter of warmth in the cold cavern of my chest. She hadn't forgotten me. Even at the end, when she was sick and alone, she was thinking of me. A wave of guilt, sharp and sickening, washed over me. I'd been so wrapped up in my own misery I hadn't thought about what she was going through. I never got to say goodbye, never got to thank her, never got to tell her I was sorry. The bus made a stop in a small, nameless town. A few people got on, their faces tired and etched with the lines of hard lives. They glanced at me, at my ill-fitting clothes and the harsh institutional haircut I was still growing out, and then quickly looked away. I was invisible, a ghost haunting the back of a bus, and I was grateful for it. As the journey wore on, the landscape began to change. The forests grew thicker, the hills rolling into low, rugged mountains. The towns became smaller, farther apart. This was a place people left, not a place they came to. What was in Havenwood? What could possibly be waiting for me at the end of this road? I clutched the key in my pocket, the metal digging into my palm. It was the only thing that felt real. My grandmother had sent me on one last journey into the unknown. For the first time since walking out of those gates, a feeling other than numbness began to stir. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something more fragile, more tentative. It was curiosity. The bus hissed to a stop in what could generously be called the center of Havenwood. It was little more than a crossroads with a gas station, a boarded-up general store, and a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "Eat." I was the only one who got off. The bus pulled away with a groan of gears, leaving me in a profound and sudden silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind through the tall grass. The sun was beginning to set, painting the bruised purple clouds with streaks of orange and pink. It was beautiful. in a lonely, desolate kind of way. I asked the tired-looking woman behind the counter at the gas station for directions to Crow Ridge Road. She eyed my box and my thin jacket before pointing a thumb down a narrow, unpaved road that vanished into the darkening woods. "Boat 3 miles that way," she said, her voice flat. "Nothing out there but the old Miller place, been empty for years." Miller, that was my grandmother's name. Sarah Miller. A knot formed in my stomach. The old Miller place. It sounded ominous, final. I thanked her, bought a bottle of water and a bag of chips with my precious cash, and started walking. The road was more of a dirt track, rutted and overgrown. The trees pressed in on either side, their branches interlocking overhead to form a dark canopy. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp earth and decaying leaves. With every step, I felt like I was walking further away from the known world, deeper into a forgotten corner of the map. My sneakers, the ones they'd given me upon release, were thin and offered little protection from the sharp stones on the path. The box grew heavier, its corners digging into my side. Twice, I had to stop and rest, my breath coming in ragged clouds in the chilly air. The sounds of the forest were all around me now. The rustle of some unseen creature in the undergrowth, the mournful hoot of an owl. I felt watched, an intruder in a place that had long been left to itself. After what felt like an eternity, the trees began to thin. The road opened into a clearing, and there it was. The house stood silhouetted against the last of the dying light. A dark, sagging shape that seemed more like a part of the landscape than something built by human hands. It was a 2-story farmhouse, its paint peeled away by years of sun and snow, leaving the wood a silvery, weathered gray. The windows were dark, vacant eyes. The porch roof tilted at a dangerous angle, and the yard was a tangled mess of weeds and wildflowers that had run rampant. To the side of the driveway, leaning like a tired old man, was a rusted metal mailbox, its door hanging open on a single hinge. 147. The numbers were faded but still legible. This was it. This was the place. I stopped at the edge of the property, a wave of disbelief washing over me. My grandmother, who had lived in a cramped city apartment, owned this forgotten house, this piece of land at the end of a long, lonely road. It made no sense. I walked slowly up the cracked driveway, my footsteps unnaturally loud in the evening quiet. The place felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the sheer weight of time and neglect. It was a monument to abandonment. I felt a strange kinship with it. I set my box down on the crumbling porch steps and approached the mailbox. It groaned in protest as I pushed the door shut. The brass key from the envelope felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the lock on the front door of the house. A modern deadbolt, a stark contrast to the surrounding decay. The key was too old, too ornate for that. On a whim, I tried the key on the small, rusted lock of the mailbox. It slid in perfectly. With a stiff, grating click, the lock turned. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would she have a key for the mailbox sent to me? What could possibly be inside an abandoned mailbox that was so important? My fingers trembled as I pulled the door open again. It wasn't empty. Lying at the bottom was a thick, heavy envelope, the kind used for legal documents. It was made of stiff, cream-colored paper, sealed with a blob of dark red wax. My name, Leo, was written across the front in my grandmother's elegant, looping handwriting. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the envelope in my hands. The paper was cool and stiff, the wax seal a perfect, unbroken circle. It felt ancient, sacred. The last light of day was fading fast, and the chill in the air was seeping into my bones. I needed to move, to do something, but I was frozen, caught in the gravity of this single, unexpected object. This was it. The reason she'd sent me here. The answer to the questions that had been swirling in my mind all day. I retreated to the porch steps, sinking down onto the cold, gritty wood. The house loomed behind me, a silent, watchful presence. The wind rustled through the tall weeds, a sound like a long, slow exhale. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for me to act. My fingers traced the letters of my name. Her handwriting was as familiar as my own face, but seeing it now, knowing her hand would never write my name again, was like a punch to the gut. The grief I had suppressed for so long began to crack through the walls I'd built. A hot, tight feeling rose in my throat. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes, willing myself not to break down. Not here, not now. I had to know what she wanted to tell me. With a deep, shuddering breath, I broke the wax seal. The crack it made was sharp and final in the quiet evening. Inside was a thick stack of folded pages, filled with her familiar script. There was also another key, smaller and more modern, tied to a piece of twine, a house key. I unfolded the first page and began to read. "My dearest Leo," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have made the journey. I am so sorry, my boy, so sorry I couldn't be there to meet you at the gates, to wrap you in a hug and tell you that everything will be all right. Please know that not a day went by that I did not think of you, that I did not pray for your strength and your safety." I had to stop, my vision blurring. I swiped at my eyes with the sleeve of my jacket and forced myself to continue reading. "I imagine you are confused, standing in this wild, forgotten place. You must think your old grandma lost her mind. You only ever knew me in that little city apartment, but this, Leo, this is home. This is where I was born, where your mother was born. This is the Miller land. It has been in our family for 100 years. I left the city and came back here when I got sick. I wanted to spend my last days looking out at these hills." I looked up from the page, out at the dark shapes of the hills ringing the property. My mother was born here? She had never spoken of it. Her past was a locked room I was never allowed to enter. My grandmother's letter was the key. "I know it doesn't look like much right now," she wrote. "I got too weak to keep it up at the end, but the bones of this place are strong, Leo. The house is sturdy, the well is deep, and the land is good. It's yours now, all of it. I have left you everything I have in this world. It's not a fortune, but it is a start. It is a place to stand, a place to breathe, a place to heal. A place to heal." The words hung in the air, shimmering with a meaning I could barely comprehend. 2 years in a concrete box had taught me how to be hard, how to be numb. I had forgotten what it felt like to even consider healing. "The key taped to this letter is for the front door," she continued. "The door might stick a little. You have to jiggle it just right. Inside, you will find what you need to get by for a while. I did what I could. Be careful on the 3rd step of the stairs. It has a tendency to announce visitors. Your room is the one at the end of the hall, facing the sunrise. I left it just as it was when you were a little boy and used to spend summers here." Summers? I searched my memory, but there was nothing. A void. My childhood was a collection of blurry images, of moving between apartments, of my mother's fleeting presence. There were no summer homes, no rolling hills. It was as if she were describing someone else's life. "I know you might not remember," the letter went on, as if she could hear my thoughts. "Things were difficult with your mother. She wanted a different life, away from here. She tried to erase this place from our story, but the land remembers, Leo, and I hope in time you will too. This is your inheritance, not just the house and the dirt, but the chance to have a home a real one. Don't let anyone take that from you. Be strong, my boy, stronger than I was. All my love, Grandma." I folded the letter, my hands shaking. The small key felt warm now, infused with the weight of her love and her sacrifice. The sky was almost completely dark, a blanket of deep indigo pricked with the first stars. A profound sense of loneliness washed over me, but for the first time, it wasn't tinged with despair. It was a clean, sharp grief. A pain that came from love, not from emptiness. I stood up, my legs stiff from the cold. I walked to the front door, the house a massive, breathing shadow in the starlight. I slid the key into the deadbolt. It turned smoothly. Just as she'd said, the door stuck. I pushed, then remembered her words. I jiggled the handle, and with a low groan of protest, the door swung inward, opening into a deep and total darkness. The air that flowed out of the house was thick and heavy, a cocktail of dust, decaying wood, and the faint ghostly scent of my grandmother's chamomile tea. It was the smell of time itself. I stood on the threshold hesitating. Stepping inside felt like crossing a boundary into another world, a world of memories I didn't know I had. My hand fumbled along the wall, searching for a light switch. My fingers met a cold, smooth plate, and I flicked it. Nothing. The power was off. Of course it was. For a moment, I considered sleeping on the porch, waiting for the safety of daylight. But the wind was picking up again, and the thought of her words, of the home she had saved for me, pushed me forward. I took a step inside, pulling the door closed behind me. The darkness was absolute. I stood perfectly still, letting my eyes adjust. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the gloom. The hulking form of a sofa draped in a white sheet, the faint outline of a staircase against the far wall. Moonlight filtered weakly through the grimy windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. I took another cautious step, my boot echoing on the wooden floorboards. I remembered her warning about the third stair and made a mental note. I needed light. My box. I'd left it on the porch. I fumbled my way back to the door, retrieved it, and brought it inside. I rummaged through it, my fingers searching for the small book of matches I'd swiped from the gas station counter. I struck one. The sudden flare of light was blinding. In the brief, flickering life of the match, the room leaped into view. It was a living room, frozen in time. The furniture, all covered in sheets, looked like a family of ghosts. A stone fireplace stood against one wall, its hearth filled with old ashes. Dust motes danced in the tiny flame. The match burned my fingers and I dropped it, plunging back into darkness. I lit another. This time, my eyes went to the mantelpiece above the fireplace. There was a row of candles in simple glass holders. I moved quickly, lighting one, then another. The room filled with a soft, warm, dancing light. The shadows retreated to the corners, and the house began to feel less like a tomb and more like a place where people had lived. I carried a candle with me as I began to explore. The downstairs was simple: the living room, a dining room with a great sheet-covered table, and a kitchen at the back. The kitchen was a time capsule from the 70s. Faded linoleum, yellow countertops, an ancient-looking stove, but it was clean, meticulously clean. Someone, she, had wiped down every surface, swept the floor, and left it in perfect order. It was a final act of care, a gift of dignity for the home she was leaving behind. I found the staircase and, holding the candle high, I started to climb, carefully stepping over the third stair. The upstairs landing was small, with 3 doors leading off it. The first room was my grandmother's. A simple iron bed frame, a nightstand, and a rocking chair by the window. It was sparse, almost monastic. The air in here felt different, heavier with her absence. The next room was a bathroom, the porcelain of the tub and sink coated in a fine layer of dust. The last door was at the end of the hall. I pushed it open. The room was small, tucked under the eaves of the roof. There was a narrow bed, a wooden desk, and a single window that, as she'd promised, faced east. On the desk, a small carved wooden box sat waiting for me. I ran my hand over the lid. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered this box. It was a faint, flickering memory, like a half-forgotten dream. A little boy sitting on the floor, tracing the patterns carved into the wood. A summer. I had been here before. I opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were a few of my childhood treasures. A surprisingly heavy shark tooth, a collection of colorful, smooth stones, a toy soldier with one arm missing, and underneath them all, another envelope. This one was smaller, a simple white business envelope with my name on it. I sank down onto the edge of the dusty bed, the old springs groaning in protest. I opened this second letter. It was short, just a few lines. Leo, this is for the practical things. Food, electricity, a new pair of boots. Survive first. Then you can learn to live. I believe in you. Tucked inside the folded paper was a thick wad of cash. I counted it, my hands clumsy with disbelief. $2,000, in 20s and 50s. It was more money than I had ever held in my life. And then, finally, the walls I had built so carefully over the past 2 years crumbled to dust. I sat there, in the cold, dusty room of a childhood I couldn't remember, and I cried. I cried for my grandmother, for her love and her foresight. I cried for the lost years, for the boy I had been, and the man I had to become. I cried until I was empty, until all that was left was the flickering candlelight, the silence of the old house, and the weight of a second chance I never believed I would get. The first few days were a blur of motion and exhaustion. Sleep came in fits and starts on the lumpy mattress in my old room. My dreams, a chaotic mix of prison grays and the sun-drenched green of the hills outside my window. During the day I worked. It was the only thing I knew how to do to keep the ghosts at bay. I started with the practicalities my grandmother's money afforded me. My first trip back into Havenwood was different. I walked with a purpose now, not as a drifter, but as someone with a destination. I went to the town's small utility office and, using a chunk of the cash, had the power and water turned back on. The woman behind the counter was the same one from the gas station. She looked at me with a new, undisguised curiosity. "You're Sarah Miller's boy, then," she said, her tone not unkind. "Heard you were coming." News traveled fast in a town this small. I just nodded, paid the deposit, and left, the stares of the few other people in the office following me out the door. My next stop was the diner. I ordered a real breakfast. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, the works. I ate like a starved animal, the simple hot food a luxury beyond words. Then I went to the general store, which had apparently reopened for business, and bought cleaning supplies, work gloves, groceries, and a sturdy pair of work boots. The transformation was immediate. Pulling on the new boots, feeling the solid weight of them on my feet, I felt more grounded, more real than I had in years. Back at the house, the flick of a switch brought the old light fixtures to life, chasing the deep shadows from the corners and revealing the true extent of the decay. Dust lay over everything like a fine gray shroud. I spent the next 2 days cleaning, a frantic, methodical purge. I pulled the sheets off the furniture, beating clouds of dust from them in the yard. I scrubbed floors, washed windows, and wiped down every surface until my arms ached and my knuckles were raw. The work was punishing, but it was honest. With every swipe of the rag, with every bucket of dirty water I poured out, I felt like I was clearing away not just the grime of the house, but the grime in my own soul. I was making a space for myself, earning my place here. The house began to breathe again. The clean windows let in the bright autumn sunlight, illuminating the warm tones of the old wood floors. The air, once stale and heavy, now smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh air from the open windows. I started to notice the details, the intricate pattern of the wallpaper in the dining room, the smooth, worn feel of the wooden banister under my hand, the way the light fell across the living room in the late afternoon. It was a good house, a strong house, just as she'd said. One afternoon, while sweeping the living room, my broom caught on a loose floorboard near the hearth. It wasn't just loose. It was cut. A perfect rectangle, designed to be lifted. My heart started to pound again. My grandmother, it seemed, was a woman of many secrets. I knelt down and used the tips of my fingers to pry the board up. It came away easily. Beneath it, in the dark space between the floor joists, was a metal box, the kind used for cash or important documents. It was heavy. I lifted it out and set it on the floor, my hands covered in cobwebs. It was locked, but the key was sitting right on top of it, held in place with a piece of brittle, yellowed tape. I unlocked the box and lifted the lid. The contents were neatly organized. On top was a stack of old photographs, bound with a rubber band. I slid it off and looked at the first picture. It was of a young woman with my grandmother's eyes and a rebellious smile, holding a baby. My mother. And the baby, that had to be me. I looked so small, so impossibly new. I flipped through the other photos. Pictures of this house, but vibrant and alive. A vegetable garden bursting with produce, a freshly painted porch, my grandmother, younger and stronger, laughing as she pushed a small boy on a tree swing. Me. The memories were still absent, a locked door in my mind, but the pictures were proof. I existed here. I had a history here. Beneath the photos was a thick, leather-bound ledger and a sheaf of official-looking papers. The papers were the deed to the property, 147 acres, and the house, all in my name, Leo Miller, transferred and filed a month before her death. She had made sure. She had left nothing to chance. Finally, at the very bottom of the box was one more letter, in an envelope identical to the first one I'd found in the mailbox, sealed with the same red wax. My name was on the front. A chill went down my spine. This felt different, more serious. The first letters were about survival, about home. This one, hidden away under the floorboards with the deed, felt like a warning. I broke the seal and began to read. My dearest Leo, this letter began, her script a little shakier than in the others, as if written with great effort. If you have found this box, it means you have decided to stay. It means you are cleaning, you are working, you are making this house your home. That makes my heart sing, my boy, but it also means I have to tell you the rest of the story, the hard part. This land, this home, it comes with a fight. I paused, the word sending a jolt of anxiety through me. A fight? I'd had enough fights to last a lifetime. I just wanted peace. This land is worth more than just timber and soil, Leo. Years ago, a geological survey found a significant deposit of quartz deep beneath Crow Ridge. Not just any quartz, but high-purity crystalline quartz, the kind used for electronics, for computer chips. It's valuable, very valuable. For the last 10 years, a corporation called Ridgeview Holdings has been trying to buy up all the land on this ridge. They've succeeded with most of our old neighbors, buying them out with offers that seemed too good to refuse, or by pressuring them, threatening them with legal battles they couldn't afford. They have everything now. Everything except our 147 acres. Our land sits right on top of the richest part of the deposit. My mind reeled. Mineral rights, development companies. These were concepts from a world I knew nothing about. I was just a kid who'd gotten out of juvie trying to figure out how to work a washing machine. I fought them, Leo, the letter continued. Your grandfather fought them before me. They offered me money, a life-changing amount of it. Enough to put you in the best schools, to give you everything I never could. I was tempted, God knows I was. Especially after you got into trouble, I thought maybe I could buy your way out, fix your future with their money. But I know this company, Leo. I've seen what they do. They don't build, they destroy. They would have strip-mined this entire ridge, torn down the forests, poisoned the water. They would have ripped the heart out of this place and sold it for parts. This land was our family's legacy, a place of peace, a home. It felt wrong to sell it for something so ugly. So I said no. I kept saying no, even when they started to threaten me. The page trembled in my hand. They had threatened my sick grandmother. A hot, dark anger, an emotion I hadn't felt in a long time, began to smolder in my gut. They will come for you, Leo. They'll find out you're here. They'll see a young man, alone, with no resources. They will assume you are desperate. They will offer you a fraction of what the land is worth, and they will make it sound like the deal of a lifetime. They will lie to you. They will tell you that you'll lose the land to back, taxes, or that they can take it through eminent domain. Do not believe them. The taxes are paid up for the next 5 years. I took care of that. And they cannot take this land, not without a fight. In this box you will find the name and number of a man named Arthur Abernathy. He is a lawyer in town, and he was a dear friend to your grandfather. He knows everything about Ridgeview. He knows their tactics. If they come to you, you call him. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Just call Arthur. Trust him. He will help you. This is a heavy burden to place on your young shoulders, I know. You have the right to walk away. You could sell, take the money, and start a new life somewhere far away from here. No one would blame you, but I am asking you to consider staying, to consider fighting, not for me, but for yourself, to protect this one small piece of the world that is yours. Whatever you choose, I will be proud of you. Be safe, my brave boy. All my love, Grandma. I let the letter fall into my lap. The quiet house suddenly felt charged with tension. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed harsh and interrogating. My small, fragile peace was shattered. She had left me not just a home, but a war. I was a soldier who didn't know the enemy, the terrain, or the rules of engagement. All I had was a name in a box and a warning from a ghost. I looked at my hands, calloused from the cleaning, and they seemed like the hands of a stranger. Could these hands fight a corporation? Could I, a boy who had failed at everything, succeed where she had barely held on? The weight of her faith in me was crushing. She called me her brave boy. I had never felt less brave in my entire life. Now, I need to pause for a second and talk directly to you. If you've made it this far, thank you. This part of the story, the part where the real weight of the world comes crashing down, is always the hardest. Maybe you've had a moment like this in your own life. A moment where you inherited a problem you didn't create, where you were asked to be stronger than you ever thought you could be. It's that point where you can either run or stand your ground. It's terrifying. And if you're facing a moment like that right now, I just want you to know, you're not alone. We all have our own version of Ridgeview Holdings, those forces that try to take what's valuable to us. Let me know in the comments what this story is bringing up for you. What does the word home mean to you? And what would you fight to protect? Your stories matter here, they really do. Now, let's get back to what happened next on that lonely ridge. For 2 days, I did nothing. I was paralyzed by the letter. I'd wander through the rooms of the house, touching the furniture, looking out the windows at the vast, silent expanse of trees, and I'd feel the invisible presence of Ridgeview Holdings looming over it all. The land no longer felt like a sanctuary, it felt like a target, and I was standing right in the middle of it. I read the letter again and again, trying to glean some hidden strength from her words. This is your inheritance. Not just the house in the dirt, but the chance to have a home. Every time I read that line, a stubborn knot of defiance tightened in my chest. I had spent 2 years in a system designed to strip me of any sense of self-worth, to make me believe I was nothing more than my worst mistake. Then my grandmother had given me this, a place, an identity, a history. Was I really going to let some faceless corporation bully me out of it before I even had a chance to understand what it meant? The temptation to sell was a constant, insidious whisper in my mind. The money. I could disappear. I could go anywhere, be anyone. I could buy a small apartment, get a normal job, and leave Leo Miller, inmate 734, behind for good. It was the easy path, the clean break. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it would be a different kind of prison. I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, knowing that I had run, knowing that I had sold my grandmother's legacy for my own comfort. On the 3rd morning, I woke up with the sunrise, just as she'd said I would. The light poured through my window, setting the dust motes dancing. I watched the mist burn off the hills, revealing the vibrant, fiery colors of the autumn leaves. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and it was mine. I made my decision. I wasn't going to run. I didn't know if I could win, but I was going to fight. I found the card in the metal box. Arthur Abernathy, attorney at law, it read, with a phone number and an address in town. I was about to go find the old rotary phone in the kitchen when I heard it. The sound of an engine growing closer. A car was coming up my road. My stomach plunged. They were here. Already. I went to the living room window and peered through the edge of the curtain. A sleek, black sedan, completely out of place on the rugged dirt road, was pulling into my driveway. It gleamed in the morning sun, an arrogant intrusion on the quiet landscape. A man in a tailored suit got out. He was in his 40s with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked around at the house, a flicker of distaste crossing his features before he smoothed it back into a mask of professional charm. He walked up to the porch and knocked on the door, a sharp, confident rap. I took a deep breath, my grandmother's letter feeling like a shield in my pocket. I opened the door. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "My name is Marcus Thorne, from Ridgeview Holdings. Are you the new owner of this property?" I just nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat was dry. "Excellent," he said, extending a hand. I didn't take it. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Look, I'll be direct. We know you've just come into this property. We also have an idea of your situation." He said the word with a delicate, calculated emphasis. He knew. He knew about Northwood. "A place like this," he said, gesturing vaguely at the house, "it's a lot of upkeep, a lot of liability, property taxes, repairs. It can become a real burden, especially for a young man just starting out." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We're prepared to make you a very generous offer to take it off your hands. $100,000, cash. You could walk away from here today, a clean slate, a new start. $100,000. The number was dizzying. It was more money than I could even imagine. The easy path was right here, standing on my porch, offering me a way out. I could feel the pull of it, the siren song of a simple, unburdened life. But then I saw my grandmother's face in my mind. I heard her voice from the letter. "They will lie to you." "The land isn't for sale," I said. My voice was raspy, but it was firm. Thorne's smile tightened. "I think you should reconsider," he said, his tone shifting, the honeyed charm giving way to a harder edge. "This isn't a negotiation. That's our final offer. Frankly, it's more than this dilapidated place is worth. We're doing you a favor. There are complications with the title. Unpaid tax assessments from years ago that your grandmother seemed to have overlooked. It could get tied up in court for years. You'd end up with nothing." The lies. Just as she'd predicted. The taxes were paid. "No," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "The answer is no." For the first time, the mask dropped completely. His eyes were cold, hard chips of stone. "You're making a mistake, kid," he hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. We will get this land, one way or another. You can take the easy money or you can take the hard road, but the destination is the same." He threw a business card onto the porch floor. "You have 24 hours to change your mind." He turned without another word, got back in his shiny black car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust to settle in his wake. I stood there, my heart hammering, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He was gone, but his threat hung in the air like poison. I looked down at his business card, then at the house, the trees, the hills. My home. The fear was real, a cold knot in my stomach. But underneath it something else was burning, a fierce, protective rage. He had called me kid. He had threatened me on my own porch. He had tried to steal my grandmother's legacy. He had picked the wrong fight. I went inside, straight to the phone. I picked up the heavy receiver, and with a steady hand, I dialed the number for Arthur Abernathy. The office of Arthur Abernathy was on the second floor of an old brick building on Havenwood's Main Street. It was a small, cluttered space, smelling of old paper, leather, and pipe tobacco. Books were stacked everywhere, on shelves, on the floor, on the corners of a massive oak desk. The man behind the desk matched the room perfectly. He was in his late 60s with a wild mane of white hair, a tweed jacket with worn leather elbows, and kind, intelligent eyes behind a pair of thick spectacles. He stood up as I entered, a warm smile creasing his face. "You must be Leo," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "You have your grandmother's eyes. Please, sit down." He gestured to a worn leather armchair. I sat, feeling awkward and out of place. I quickly recounted the visit from Marcus Thorne, the offer, the threats. Abernathy listened patiently, nodding, his hands steepled under his chin. He didn't seem surprised. When I finished, he let out a long sigh. "Marcus Thorne," he said, the name tasting like something sour. "He's their cleaner. He specializes in intimidation. I'm sorry you had to meet him." "He said the land would be ours, one way or another," I said, the words still ringing in my ears. "Is that true? Can they just take it?" Abernathy leaned back in his chair, the old leather groaning. "No," he said firmly. "They cannot. Sarah, your grandmother, was a brilliant and stubborn woman. She and I spent the better part of 5 years setting up a fortress of legal protections around that property. The title is clean. The taxes are prepaid. The land is zoned as a historical family homestead, which makes it incredibly difficult for a corporation to force a sale or use eminent domain. She insulated you from every angle she could think of." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said, a glint in his eye, We fight back. Ridgeview's strategy is based on bullying and misinformation. They assume you're an ignorant kid they can scare off. We're going to show them they're wrong. The first step is to file a harassment complaint against Mr. Thorne. It won't stick, but it puts them on notice that you have legal representation. It tells them the game has changed. He spent the next hour walking me through the details, explaining the legal jargon in simple terms. He showed me copies of the geological surveys, pointing out the value of what lay beneath my feet. It was a staggering number, far beyond the insulting offer Thorne had made. But as we talked, I realized something. It wasn't about the money, not for me, and not for my grandmother. It was about the principle. It was about protecting a home. Your grandmother loved that land, Abernathy said softly, as if reading my mind. She could have sold it a dozen times, but she always said it was the only place she ever felt truly free. She wanted that for you, Leo, a place to stand your ground. I left his office feeling like a different person. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. Now it was fuel. I had an ally. I had a plan. I had a purpose. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting against something, my past, the system. I was fighting for something, for my home, for my grandmother's memory, for my own future. As I walked back down the main street, the people of Havenwood didn't seem like strangers anymore. The woman from the gas station gave me a small, encouraging nod as I passed. The old man, sweeping the sidewalk in front of the diner, smiled at me. They were watching. They knew about Ridgeview. They had seen this play out before with their neighbors. In their eyes, I saw a flicker of hope. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them, too, for the memory of what this town used to be before the corporation came. That night, I didn't just clean, I started to repair. I found a toolbox in the old shed and I fixed the loose banister on the stairs. I hammered down the creaking floorboards. I even tackled the third step, securing it with a couple of long nails, silencing its warning. It was time for the house to stop being afraid of visitors. I was home, and I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. There were more letters from Ridgeview's lawyers, official and threatening, which I dutifully took to Arthur. There were also quiet acts of support from the community. Someone left a box of fresh vegetables on my porch. The owner of the general store started giving me a discount, saying it was for Sarah's boy. I was no longer an outsider. I was becoming part of the fabric of this place. I spent my days working on the land, clearing away the overgrown brush, patching the roof of the shed, mending the long, sagging line of the fence. The physical labor was grounding. It connected me to the property in a way that no deed ever could. I was pouring my own sweat, my own effort into its soil. I was earning my inheritance. One cold, clear evening, I built a fire in the fireplace. I sat in the old armchair, the one I'd finally uncovered from its sheet, and I read through my grandmother's ledger. It wasn't just numbers, it was a history of the farm. Records of harvests, notes on the weather, stories of births and deaths. It was the story of my family. And at the very end, there was a final entry in her familiar, elegant hand. For Leo, it read, home is not a place you are given. It is a place you make, and a place you defend. You are a miller. You are a fighter. Make me proud. I looked into the flames, the warmth on my face, the solid walls of the house around me. The road ahead was long and uncertain. Ridgeview Holdings wasn't going to give up easily. There would be more threats, more legal battles, more days filled with fear and doubt. But for the first time since I was a child, I felt safe. I felt strong. I was home. This place, this fight, had given me back the parts of myself I thought I had lost forever in Northwood. My grandmother's final gift wasn't the house, or the land, or the money. It was this feeling, the feeling of belonging, the knowledge that I was more than my mistakes, that my story was not over. It was just beginning. And that's the lesson, isn't it? The one that this whole journey taught me. Home isn't just about four walls and a roof. It's about connection. It's about history. It's about having a piece of the world that you are willing to fight for, that reminds you of who you are and who you want to be. It's the anchor that keeps you steady when the storms come. My fight with Ridgeview went on for years, a long, grinding war of attrition. But I never gave up. Arthur was by my side the whole time, and the community stood with me. And eventually, we won. Not with a big, dramatic courtroom victory, but quietly. A new environmental regulation passed, making their proposed mining operation impossible. They packed up their slick cars and their empty promises, and they left Havenwood for good. I'm still here. The house is no longer sagging. The paint is fresh, the garden is thriving, and the porch is a good place to sit and watch the sunrise. It's not a palace, but it's mine. It's a testament to the idea that a second chance is not something you're given, but something you build board by board, day by day. It's built on the love of those who came before us, and it's solidified by our own courage to stand our ground. So, I want to ask you one last time to reflect on this with me. What is the land you are fighting to protect? It might be a relationship, a dream, a creative project, or your own mental health. Whatever it is, I hope you find the strength to defend it. I hope you find your own Mr. Abernathy, your own community to stand with you. And I hope you remember that you are more than your mistakes. If this story meant something to you, if it gave you a little bit of strength for your own fight, please subscribe to the channel and share your story in the comments below. I read every one. Because every story of resilience is a light in the dark, and together we can build a community that reminds us all that we are never truly alone. Thank you for listening.